Ex-convicts, what is the worst thing you have ever seen a guard do while in prison? I had a friend whose brother was a prison guard. He had some stories, but the only one I remember was a time when there was a prisoner in solitary for a while who had become very attached to a praying mantis that had somehow made its way into his cell. The mantis lived with him for quite some time and he loved it like it was his friend. One day a prison guard who wasn't aware of the mantis being important to this prisoner stepped into the cell, saw the mantis, and promptly slammed his hand down on it to kill it. The prisoner was, understandably, devastated. I'm a CO, and one of the worst things I ever saw was an officer kidney punch a handcuffed inmate. Naturally, I reported it. That officer is now a deputy warden. Specifically, my deputy warden. True story. I worked at a max facility and I was super respectful, no need not to be ever, and the men there were always super respectful back. It's frustrating that other officers didn't realize this and administration didn't realize that the same officers who kept having issues were having issues because they were starting it. I really enjoyed my job. I was super strict because I have a fear of getting in trouble. I communicated well and seriously never had issues. My favorite memory was I was working straight 16 to 17 hours shifts for 27 days in a row before I was scheduled for a major surgery. The inmates knew because it was a small prison and no one keeps their mouth shut, lol. But I was sitting in the guard box on the yard and I looked at my watch and it was 1700 and blinked and it was 1800 and an inmate is tapping on the window, letting me know second shift was on so I wouldn't get in trouble. I obviously didn't mean to fall asleep, I was just exhausted. It was just a super nice thing to do. Once saw a CO stomp the back of an inmate's head and watched the heel of his boot literally scalp the guy. Huge chunk of head meat and hair stuck to a black boot still sits fresh in my memory, yet it was 6 years ago. Same guard was smuggling in spice and heroin. The inmate probably owed a debt is my speculation. A friend who did time in a federal prison told me that the intimidation by the guards is far worse than that by other inmates. Not sure if this counts, but here it goes. A horrible CO was as bad as they come. The other cost didn't seem to like him either. Beat up inmates, steal their stuff, made them play reindeer games, etc. One inmate just wasn't having it and was some shot caller in a Mexican gang. I don't know anything about which one or Mexican gangs in general. One day, this Mexican shot caller handed the guard pictures of hitmen following around his kids at school and even their bedrooms while they were away. Took a picture of a bullet left in the kids' rooms and when the CO went home, sure enough it was there. This pretty much implied he was going to kill the Cos family. The CO quit. I won't say where and when, but when I arrived, the staff opened 2 cell doors to an empty day room floor. My cellmate, not having much to do except be nosy, stared out the window. It happened quickly, but he immediately recognized what was going on and mattered, "Aw shit, here we go again." I went to look. From one door appeared a one-armed skinhead who walked towards the only other cell open. A kid, alone in his new cell, poked his head out to see why they cracked his door. He saw the skinhead and froze up. The skinhead pushed him inside and fucked him up. I later found out it was staged fighting by the guards. When I worked at a state prison, there were COS who got caught having sex with inmates. When you're horny, you gotta do what you gotta do, but you can't do any better than an inmate at your place of employment. Blood rushed to the wrong head there. Fight broke out in cafeteria. Normally guards will let the fight transpire for a minute before jumping in, mainly to let them fight it out and settle their differences. It was 2 dudes. A minute into the fight, one dude pulls out a knife and straight up pierces the other dude in the head. Guards were well aware of the situation and just fucking watched. Guy bled out and they finally tackled the stabber. A solid 2 minutes had passed before they even did anything. I was in prison for 2 years, found guilty of mugging. I didn't do it, it was my sister, and had a cell to myself. I'm a 24-year-old woman and at the time was 16. The guard by my cell would always try and flirt with me and would come into my cell and touch me. Fast forward about 8 months. Maybe 12 a.m. Everyone else was asleep and to my dismay, so was the night guard. That officer opened my cell and quietly crept up on me in my sleep. He grabbed my shirt and tried to rip it off, and when I punched him he grabbed my pants. I screamed, which woke up the night guard. I don't know much of what happened after that. All I know is the dude was fired, sent to prison, and I was put with a female night guard. Moral of the story: prison guards can do pretty bad things. Our cops were pretty human. We had a little guy, probably 5 feet 3 inches, who was pretty arrogant, but we all figured that it was probably because he was afraid. Note: minimum security state prison in the late 70s. Let the K9 shit on an inmate. Happened far more than once. One of my cellmates got it once for getting in a fight. Not as bad as solitary, but still, people don't realize that there's essentially no enforceable rules that cops have to follow as long as no inmates die. It's not like you're going to report them. Don't know if is the worst thing, but the guards blackmailed my family in the visiting days so they could see me. The price? An overpriced 3L Coke, $80 approx, sold by the store inside the prison, run by the cartel. So yeah, it was cold tough. One of my favorite things to do was toss cells looking for contraband. It was like a treasure hunt to me. I always was very respectful with inmates' stuff. It could be what most would perceive as nothing, but I respected the inmates' belongings as I would want someone to with mine. If they had a clean locker, I would move things and then arrange the on their bed or another already searched area neatly so when they returned to their cell, they could put things back neatly and efficiently. I had prisoners requesting that I do their checking when it came time. I did my job well, and was known for finding a fair amount of contraband. Now I had a coworker who took what you might call the opposite approach. If he could break, ruin, or destroy property, he did with glee. He'd open food packages, accidentally spill, throw out photos or anything of the sort. I watched him throw an inmate's legal folder in the toilet, and I'm a separate incident, tear up photos of an inmate's kids. He was an asshole. I reported him naturally, but was basically told that I should appreciate his tenacity. I only lasted 6 months in that environment and was glad to switch roles to being the GED teacher, which was way better. They wait minutes before breaking a fight. That must be the only thing. Also did nothing when I was being stabbed. Sometimes they were nice. Treated you as humans, and sometimes they beat the living hell out of you. But some are really nice one. When you figure, they are just doing their jobs. I read through these posts and still can't believe if some of them are even true. I have seen weird shit, but not to that extent. This comment section kinda freaks me out. Everything from just beating the fuck out of inmates, to popping an inmate's cell door open for another inmate to pull a surprise attack. One time this one CO let this riot go on for a hot minute before he called first response. South Carolina prisons are fucked up. Saw a 14-year-old kid get taken to the hole for fighting. Said some smart-ass shit to the guards while in transit and they leg swept him and he broke several teeth on the concrete. His hands were cuffed to his waist and his legs were shackled. He had zero way to catch himself and prevent injury. Common story, unfortunately. The worst thing about prison was the Dementors. They were flying all over the place and they were scary, and then they'd come down and they'd suck the soul out of your body and it hurt. I've been in a few times, only one day max each time though. The worst thing I saw is ignoring inmates going through crises. They wouldn't give me my medicine and I had a panic attack. They straight up ignore you. It's terrifying. A lady even died in our local jail due to this. They also make you stay in a cell by yourself at first, for 24 hours at least. Doesn't sound like much, but it's very alienating and basically solitary confinement. No human contact, no books, no pen and paper, nothing. Not even a clock. That's what fucked me up the most. These are probably more systemic issues than individual guards. But yet, I ran cell phones on my compound, never got cough height. One guard in particular had heard about this but could never catch me. A week before IEOS he planted weed on me, caught me with it, took me to the back out of sight for a few min, then instead of sending me to the box he let me go to make it look like I snitched on someone to get out of trouble. Backfired for him, as my name was already good on the compound and I had a rep for keeping my mouth shut, so nothing bad came of it luckily, but his intention was to get me jumped/poked up right before I went home. Guards are usually sick individuals who get their self-confidence from dehumanizing grown men. Shoulda put a serious tag on this bud. So many stories. I remember working the hole. People flooding, throwing shit under the door. Walked in and said it's my shift now. Everyone mellowed out and I spent the night walking cell to cell talking to inmates while they cleaned up. Here in Australia you can be an ex-convict without ever having been in prison. Watch a person die when they could do anything to prevent it. Use a can of spray on a person for having an epileptic seizure. Assault a kid, then when they went to report it grab him from behind and choke him out. Kick a guy after taking 40 minutes to respond to a distress call, not a nice way to deal with remains. Youth center, so not really prison. I was in and out a lot in my later teens, and I remember this one kid was having a bad day. He must have been 16 to 17, and yelling, refusing to follow orders of the COS, and next thing you know they're threatening to mace him. Kid says something along the lines of "fucking do it then," and next thing you know, guard opens up the little slot and fills the room with mace. Kid starts coughing, and although I can't see into his cell I'm sure hit the floor/tried to cover his face. They left him like that for a little bit. Watch while my friend Gus had a heart attack, and refused to call 911 for hours after he was dead on the floor of the dorm. Only did so after a bunch of us got together and ordered her to. He was long dead by that time and could not be revived, and had been imprisoned since the year I was born, 1988, for a murder back when he was married, killed the dude his wife was cheating on him with, who was also his boss at the time. Think about fighting a guy, scratch you balls, handle some jerky, then give the jerky to his roommates. Just gotta make sure it's the people always trying to figure out what the guards are up to. The COS were systematically raping female and male inmates. 7 have been tried and convicted. I know plenty of inmates, all I've heard is way too much tear gas, other than that nothing too out of the ordinary for jail. Honestly, these stories are hard to believe and I think most of them are fabricated. I was a CO in a level 3 to 4 prison in my state and I can assure you, none of this nonsense happened and the COs were watched like hawks to remain in compliance. K9s shitting on inmates? Bullshit. Milk being left in solitary? Bullshit. A prisoner was forcing them to treat him like a human being with rights, so they got some poison ivy extract, closed down all shower stalls but one and covered that shower stall with the extract, forced him to use it without sandals. It didn't take long for half his skin on his body to get infected and peel off 1/4 inch thick. Same guy a month later was called to the gate by a female guard. Using her authority she ordered him go in the guard bathrooms and fuck her. That's rape. The guard never got charged. They just transferred her. Same guy. The guards attempted to pin a murder on him. The guy always stayed in his cell, was quiet and spent his days doing amazing art with glue and popsicle sticks. Not to mention the killing happened on the other side of the prison where the guy did not have access and it was impossible for him to have done so. At a prison I worked at, a guard snuck in dismantled pieces of a gun to an inmate who had dirt on him. I was in for 48 HRS for a DUI. When I checked in, since I was prescribed to Xanax, I gave them a newly filled prescription thinking I would be given my prescribed dose, 0.25 twice per day. The bottle was never listed as part of my items and never returned. For this reason, they put me on a high-risk block due to possible withdrawal. Luckily, it didn't affect me. Once in, I had almost no appetite, so I gave my bread from lunch/dinner to an older inmate who was diabetic. He would use the bread at night because COS would purposely hold back his insulin when needed. The second night, the COS came in and tossed his cell, taking the bread they noticed him taking from lunch. I always wanted to turn them in after I was released but never did. I know a girl who was a prison guard and she said that the male prison guards were awful to her. Like wanking in front of her and sticking together to lie about her to the bosses. The prisoners themselves were nice to her because the biggest baddest one who was a cannibal looked out for her after she asked him for advice about cooking meat. No joke, the cannibal was a butcher by trade. Fuck jail. Just research what the American Army did at Abu Ghraib prisons. During the Casuarina Christmas Day riots, Perth's maximum prison, shit went down, but in the aftermath during lockdown every crim in that prison block copped to dogs hiding during the lockdown with batons and shields, in some cases violation with pepper spray, in one extreme case a crim in a separate block from the one involved but still under system-wide lockdown asked for an asthma puffer and had the beat-down team visit him and give him a dose of pepper spray the same way one would have the asthma puffer administered. Edit crim means criminal. I'm far too lazy to type 4 more letters.